Recording in progress.
Very good morning, all honorable members. Good morning to our support staff. It is exactly 9 o'clock. I see Honorable Spies has joined us. So I do think we have a quorum to start our meeting. Can I just confirm that, Mr. Mdumizweni?
Morning, Chair. Yes, Chair, we do have a quorum. We can start, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mdumizweni. Colleagues, in front of us is the agenda for this morning. It is an opening and a welcome adoption of the agenda. We will deal with apologies. We will adopt our minutes and reports, and we will also consider changes to the second term program, which we didn't deal with in our last meeting. We will then sign off, hopefully, on the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide ad, so that we can start the advertising process by 1 July. And we will then be receiving a briefing from National Treasury. Thereafter, we will have deliberations and closure. Can I see whether members are happy to adopt the agenda? Honorable Spies?
Good morning, Chair. I hereby wish to move for the adoption of the agenda.
Thank you so much, Honorable Spies. Honorable Kanile?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. I second the move to adopt the agenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Kanile. Mr. Mdumizweni, please can we deal with the apologies?
Thank you, Chairperson. The apology that we have received, Chair, is from Honorable Dr. Lihlape, who's in another committee. We also received an apology from Honorable Shabangu, who indicated that she might leave earlier than expected before the meeting adjourns. And also Honorable Tsotitsi will join the meeting later due to the meeting he's currently attending, that is the PC on Justice. So those are the apologies that we have received, Chair, so far. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Mdumizweni. And we didn't get any apologies from the Honorable Pulwane and the Honorable Lonzi.
My apology, Chair, regarding Honorable Pulwane, she once indicated that she was involved in an accident. So she sent even the medical certificate. I assume that the condition or her situation remains like that. Yes, Chair. Regarding Honorable Loans, we haven't received anything from his side, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Let's talk about that tomorrow then, but I think we should then be sending a gift and some flowers to our colleague. Okay, Mr. Mdumizweni, I'm going to hand over to you to start flighting the minutes for adoption, or do you want to start with your report?
Chair, right now we have got one report that is an oversight report, so I would love to flight it before with the minutes.
Okay, you can just you can just read the introduction, and then we go to the end of the report.
Thank you, Chair. The introduction of the report reads as follows. The oversight activities of the committee takes its cue from Section 55, subsection 2 of the Constitution, which provides that the National Assembly must provide for mechanism A, to ensure that all executive organs of the state in the national sphere of government are accountable to it, and B, to maintain oversight of One, the exercise of the National Executive Authority, including the implementation of legislation, and two, any organ of the state. From the provision, it is quite from the provisions. It is quite clear that the executive is obliged to account on its actions. The oversight visits are therefore constitute myriad of mechanisms available to the committee for exercising its constitutional mandate. The Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, the Constitution places an obligation to the executive to account on its actions. Therefore, the National Assembly must set up mechanisms to hold them accountable. Therefore, the Portfolio Committee on Women with Persons or Youth and Persons with Disability considered site visits where implementation of the legislation and policies took place as a useful technique for oversight.
Okay, let's just go page by page. I hope, did honorable members look at this report? I hope so. Okay, just scroll down, page 1 to till the end. Okay, colleagues, I'm sure you've had time to go through this report. So can I ask whether anybody would like to move for the adoption of our KZN Oversight Visit Report? Honorable Adams was part of the visit, Honorable Peterson, Honorable Kanile, Honorable Spies, Honorable Chauke Adonis. Honorable Adams.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning to the colleagues on the platform. Chair, I wanted to move for the adoption of the agenda. Thank you. Sorry for the report.
Thank you so much, Honorable Adams. Can I take a hand for a seconder, please? Honorable
Chairperson,
Peterson. Good morning, Honorable Chauke Adonis.
apologies for that. I'm just struggling to raise my hand. I hereby second the adoption of the report.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Honorable Whip. And from here, we'll be making our report available to our stakeholders as well that we engage with on our oversight visit. And we will also be tracking our resolutions so that we make sure we do follow-ups in that regard. Mr. Mdumizweni, let's go to the minutes.
Chair, these are the minutes of the 26th of February 2025. They relate to the interviews that were held for the NYDA. They were previously not adopted due to the fact that there was an error with the dates. So
Yes, I remember.
that has been corrected, Chair.
Okay. Yes, this is a short set of minutes, and I remember we didn't adopt this one because of the date error. All of us were present. Honorable members, can I ask for a mover and someone to second this set of minutes, please? Honorable Spies?
Oh, Chair, thank you. I move for the adoption of the minutes.
Thank you. Honorable Kanyile?
Thank you, Chair. I second the move to adopt the minutes.
Thank you. Mbaba, the next set, please. This is again a set of minutes dealing with the NYDA interviews. It's basically exactly the same as the previous set. Can I take a hand for the adoption of this set of minutes, please? Honorable Spies?
Chair, I move for the adoption of the minutes.
Thank you. Honorable Kanyile?
Thank you, Chair. I second the move to adopt.
Thank you. Mbaba? Okay, this is the meeting of the 22nd of April. It was the meeting with stakeholders. Oh, presentation by DSD. It was the engagements we had with DSD on the SDP and the defunding of NGOs and MPOs, and we also interacted with the National Shelter Movement, as well as Ms. Lisa Vetten. Can I take a hand for the adoption of this set of minutes, please? Honorable Peterson?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Chair, I move for the adoption of these minutes.
Thank you. Honorable Spies? Honorable Spies?
Oh, sorry, Chair. I second the move for the adoption of the minutes.
Thank you so much. Next set, Mbaba, please. Okay, this is the set of the 1st of April. This was the presentation we received by the Human Rights Commission. Just scroll down, let's see who was present. Vaba. Okay. All right, can I take a hand? Honorable Adams.
Chair, may I move for the adoption of the minutes? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Adams. Honorable Chauke Aduenes.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I move to second the adoption. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Next set of minutes, please.
Chair,
Yes.
I think that's all, Chair. There were about 4 sets of minutes. So I think according to my records, that's all, Chair.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Mdumisweni. Can you then move to flighting the ad for us, please? You can just read through it for us, please, Mr. Mdumisweni.
Thank you, Chair. I would love to start by saying that this is the ad that was previously adopted by the committee, I think around April. But then after the committee or the chairperson wrote to legal services seeking a legal advice, we had to amend the agenda to add some areas that were not there previously. So I will read and indicate where we made amendments. The draft advert, which was previously adopted, reads as follows. The heading states that invitation for nominations and applications for individuals to serve on the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, abbreviated as NCGBVF. The Portfolio Committee on Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities invites members of the public from civil society and private sector to apply and organizations to nominate suitable candidates for appointment to serve on the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide as mandated by the National Council on Gender-Based Violence Act 2024, number 9 of 2024. All applicants or nominees will be required to complete an online application with a link that will be pasted later on the parliamentary website. All applicants and nominees are required to upload certified copies not older than 6 months of their identity documents and academic qualifications. Shortlisted candidates and their resumes will be published on the parliamentary website to allow members of the public to comment on the suitability of candidates. Disclosure of personal information of candidates is subject to lawful processing and secure storage. All shortlisted candidates will be subject to pre-employment screening by the State Security Agency and verification of qualifications by the Parliamentary Human Resources. All applications will be in line with Protection of Personal Information Act number 4 of 2013. and Employment Equity Act number 55 of 1998. The President will, on recommendation of Parliament, appoint a member to the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide for a term not exceeding 3 years. Each member of the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide holds office for a period not exceeding 3 years, but eligible for reappointment for only one additional term, not exceeding 3 years, and also eligible for extension of office for a period not exceeding 6 months. Requirements are as follows. As per the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Act number 9 of 2024, the candidates must be A, fit and proper person to hold office, B, person with applicable knowledge and expertise regarding matters that are related to the purpose of National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Act number 9 of 2024, and C, reflect the demographics and geographical spread of South Africa. Chair, I would love to indicate that this is the area that we have added. Hence, we have brought this for readoption, for it to be adopted again. We have added this part, which reads as follows. In addition to the above requirements, it is important for the applicants and organizations or individuals nominating candidates to know the following. The board is legislatively responsible. That is A, the board is responsible for functioning of the council. In terms of Section 3, read with Section 4 and 5, related objects and functions, it is the responsibility of the council to provide strategic leadership and coordination in the prevention of and response to gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa. B, the term of office is set out in Section 9 of the Act, along with the fact that members of the board are entitled to a salary payment, are not entitled to salary payment. Section 10 only makes provision for reimbursement and allowance determined by the Minister of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities in consultation with the Minister of Finance. Nominations or applications must contain the full name, address, contact details of the person or organization making nomination, as well as a signed acceptance form, acceptance of the nomination by nominee, including the nominator. One thing, Chair, that I must state regarding this closing date is that our aim is to ensure that the advert goes out on the 1st of July, then it runs until midnight 31, and then also targeting to open an opportunity for public participation, that is public commentary, from maybe the 1st of August to the 15th, due to the fact that we're trying so much to fast track the process, so that we finalize this matter because it's urgent. So all these details, the closing date, we are targeting 31st of July, and below are the inquiries must be directed to the committee secretary, that is myself, and my number is there, and the statement, or in fact the advert, is issued by the chairperson of the committee, Honorable Fundamero. So that's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mdumizweni. Colleagues, maybe just to give you a background as to why we asked for a legal opinion. Firstly, I wanted to say that the legal opinion was going to be presented here this morning. However, the legal advisor from Parliament is currently on sick leave, but we will share the legal opinion with honourable members. The reason for the legal opinion was, if you recall, that in February when we met with the Minister, she had given an indication that at that stage, the committee or the department was busy with engagements both with the presidency as well as Treasury in terms of making sure that we get the requisite funds to fully set up this National Council. However, it has subsequently transpired that there's no money for this council, and I needed to then seek a legal opinion to say, well, considering there's no funds for this council, how do we as a parliamentary committee proceed? Because we have to do due diligence. I mean, we will basically now be asking people to come forward to be volunteers on this council. We sought the legal advice. Parliament came back and said, well, it shouldn't stop Parliament from continuing with looking for members of civil society to serve on this council. And so we are now proceeding on an urgent basis. As Mwaba has indicated, we hope to advertise from the 1st of July to the end of July. And thereafter, we will also, obviously, as soon as we come back for the third term, we will prioritize the interviews so that we can finalize this important task at hand. But colleagues, we need to then approve this ad this morning, but you are free to make any comments if you want to. Can I take any hands? Okay, if you're all happy with the advertisement as is, then I would need somebody to, Honourable Spies, your hand is up.
Chair, can I keep my video off, please?
Yes, no problem, Honourable Spies.
I don't know, Chair, if one must take the silence of committee members as accepted, but I cannot speak on behalf of others. I can only speak because I do think that what you have said and what you have come back to us, it is extremely concerning that such an important council, and specifically within the time that we are living and the crises that we are facing, that this is how this is presented to us and how this needs to be presented to the civil society out there. I mean, Chair, if we just look at boards and we look at councils and we understand the rationale behind the establishments of this council from the beginning till it being adopted in Parliament, it must be a concern of this committee. It cannot just be accepted that now there is no money and civil society members must now just be volunteers. We are talking here, Chair, of a crisis in this country that every day, and as we sit here, we have, victims of GBV, going through either one or other incident, others being fatal, others scarred for life. And this is the seriousness that we are taking this matter forward. And I just thought it's important, and I must say that I do believe it's unacceptable. I don't think every avenue has been explored. I also don't think that this has been given the attention that it needs to be given. And that is my personal opinion. Thank you.
Can I see if there are any further hands? Let me just see here. Honourable Kanile, do you want to, because I see your hand is up. Or is it a legacy hand?
No, Chair, I just raised it now.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I have been largely covered by Honourable Spies, and I share the same sentiments. I'm really not sure if we are all in agreement that we need to proceed with the advertisement of this board as things stand currently. Maybe, I don't know, my suggestion would be to call the minister to come and explain to us why there is no budget for this council, because I remember at some point she made a commitment that she was going to engage the Treasury. And also, like Honourable Spies has indicated, we all know we are faced with a scourge of gender-based violence, and this is not the sentiment that is shared by certain parties. It is shared by all parties and all members of the country. We are all worried about the sketch that we are currently faced with. But I think as the members of this portfolio committee, we need to make a decision on this as a collective. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to Honourable Spies and Honourable Kanile for those inputs. I would like to suggest that we do have Treasury with us today, and one of the items on the agenda is around the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide and the funding thereof. You are quite correct, Honourable Kanyile and Honourable Spies, that when we did engage with the Minister in February, as I said in the beginning, commitments were made that even the President had given an indication that this commission or this council will be fully funded. Subsequently, it has now transpired, of course, that there is problems in terms of setting aside a dedicated budget for this council. Now, Treasury is before us today, so we will hear from them in terms of the resources that will be set aside for this council. I am going to share with you the legal opinion so that you can see exactly what Parliament is saying. Parliament is saying that people who will be serving on this council are anyways only entitled to a stipend and not a salary, which, as Honourable Spies points out, you've got boards on which people serve that earn big money, and yet we are now expected to establish a council that has got a key role to play in terms of this national crisis that we are facing in terms of gender-based violence, and yet it seems that there will be limited resources. However, according to the legal opinion, we do have to proceed with this work as the Portfolio Committee. The reason why I asked for this legal opinion in the beginning was to address exactly the concerns that both of you honourable members are raising, in that how do we proceed to do this work, knowing full well that down the line there might not be the requisite resources. But I will appeal, honourable members, that we move for the adoption of this advertisement and that we take it in steps. In other words, we approve the advert, we speak to Treasury today about the funding, and then also once you've seen the legal opinion, I will ask the legal advisor from Parliament, once she's back from sick leave, to come and engage members on her legal opinion, and we can also then invite the Minister to provide some input, and that we take it in those steps. So hopefully, honourable members, I know it's not good news that I'm giving you this morning, but I had to do my work to make sure that we are not proceeding in a manner that is not correct. In other words, wanting to establish a council without the requisite funds. But the legal opinion has come back saying that it should not stop us from doing the work that is required of us. Honourable Spies, I see your hand is up again, or is it a legacy hand?
No, Chair, it's not a legacy hand. I just need to see clarity. And I agree with you that the briefing obviously is key to. My only concern is when we adopt this now and afterwards we get the briefing, that we might have some input on the briefing, and that might, impact on the ad. And that's just where I want to just see clarity. I also want to, on the record, put it. Although I raised the issue around the salary, I do think that some boards are getting overpaid. But I understand if board members get reimbursed and they get a stipend, that I can live with. I think our biggest concern should be that there is no money for the functioning of this council. That is the biggest problem, because you already disarm board members from the get-go. They are doomed from the start because there is no budget to work with. And that is my concern. But I just needed that clarity that if at any point, whatever briefing we get might impact on us having to make slight changes to the ad or not. Thank you.
No, I fully agree with you, Honourable Spies, because my initial concern was if there's no dedicated finances for this council, are we not setting it up for failure? Considering this, the important mandate of this council. But I think let's move in this fashion then. Next week on the 24th, we are meeting with the Minister. So maybe what we will do is we will set aside a half an hour at the beginning of our meeting, just to then receive the legal opinion from, I think she's a doctor, Dr. Lewitz, and then we'll give the Minister a 5-minute input as well, and then we will dispense of the ad. If you are happy with us to proceed, if you're happy that we proceed in that manner for next Tuesday.
Agree, Chair.
Honourable Adams?
Chairperson, I agree with the proposal that you just made. Sorry for my voice.
Okay. Perfect. Then next Tuesday, we will start in the morning with the legal opinion from Parliamentary Legal Services. We will ask for an input from the Minister, and then we will finalize the ad. That will be the first 30 minutes of our meeting next Tuesday, which will be an in-person meeting, and then we will dispense of the ad if members are happy and you are satisfied with the legal opinion. But of course, it is your opportunity today to engage with Treasury around funding for the council. It is one of the items on the agenda. Thank you so much, Mr. Dumizweni. We can then just can take this report down. Do we have the second term program? Honorable Mabel, welcome.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Thank you. Colleagues, so let's just, I know that we didn't have time to discuss this last week, but you did get copies of the second term program on the WhatsApp group. Just move down. Okay. So today is the 10th. No, not the 10th. Yeah, 10th of June. Past 10th, on the 17th, yes, that's fine. On the 17th of June is today, and we've got a briefing by the Treasury on various items. Colleagues, as you know, I think Yolanda has also communicated with you that there's a separate briefing this afternoon at 3 o'clock via Zoom with the Multi-Party Women's Caucus on issues relating to pension funds for domestic workers. I think we received the information very late. It only came to us last night, the documents and the link, and Yolanda will make it available to those honourable members who are able to join. Then, as I've mentioned, next week on the 24th, we are meeting with our department on their strat plan and APP. We will then start at 9 instead of the 9:30 in order for us to receive a briefing on the National Council and a legal opinion in that regard. The next day, honourable members, please do indicate to Yolanda if you're available. As I've indicated, we've got a meeting with the Ambassador Delphine Owens, who's the Secretary General of the Gender Equality Forum, wishing to meet with us on that morning on the 25th. And it will be at the Marx Building in Parliament. On the Friday, we will be meeting with the National Youth Development Agency on their APP, followed with the 1st of July, when we'll meet in person again with the Commission for Gender Equality on their APP and strat plan. And this will be followed by us adopting our report on the 4th of July, and then we'll have a budget vote. And then we will have 2 workshops, although that might change. And we are currently working on an oversight program, hopefully for the 24th, in which we could possibly then visit court and a police station in Johannesburg. But we are busy finalizing the details in that regard. I just felt it important that I give honourable members just an update on some of the items that will be on our program for the remainder of the term. Because you can see it will be physical meetings and it will get really busy for the next couple of weeks. So that is the second term program. I hope everybody is okay with the second term program, or whether you want to add anything or remove anything. Okay, I think honourable members are fine with the second term program as amended, but I see Honourable Angel's hand.
Chairperson, thank you very much. I am happy with the amended program, and I propose that we adopt it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Honourable Angel. Can I take a seconder for the adoption of our amended second term program? You'll see the hand of Honorable Peterson.
Thank you, Chairperson. I second.
Thank you so much.
Chairperson,
Honorable Adams.
can we just add the change on time on the agenda on the program?
Yes, to include the item, the 9 o'clock item on the council.
Okay, thank you.
We'll include that. Thank you so much, honorable colleagues. We will now move, we've now dispensed of our internal items, and I do see that the CEO for the Commission for Gender Equality has joined us. Good morning, CEO.
Good morning, Chairperson and honorable members.
Good morning. And I also see the delegation from National Treasury. Maybe I can just hand over to the leader of the delegation to introduce the delegation.
Good morning, Honorable Chair and honorable members. My name is Mashudu Bija. I hope I'm audible.
We can hear you.
Thanks very much. My name is Mashudu Bija, Acting Chief Director within Public Finance, specifically looking after health and social development and the Department of Women, etc. With me here, I've got my other colleagues. We've got a Chief Director from Budget Office who looks after expenditure planning, and a colleague, Prudence Kale, who's also going to make a presentation here. We also have a team as well from within Public Finance that looks after police, Department of Justice, and NPA, etc. So that's the whole team. Chairperson, I wish to apologize. The National Treasury leadership this morning, they are making a presentation of the National Treasury Strategic Plan at the Finance Committee, and hence the DG is not able to join us for this morning's deliberations. Over to you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bija. I see that the Honourable Minister of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities has also joined us. Good morning, Honourable Minister. Honourable Minister, I see that you have logged in. Okay. I don't see any. Yes, Ms. Mpondo. See your hand.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, members. Minister has connected, but she's still finishing some meeting. She will be with us in the next 15 minutes, Chair.
Okay, Ms. Mpondo.
Yes,
thank
she will greet once she's in. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Colleagues, yesterday marked Youth Day, and we continue to stand in solidarity with all young people in our country affected by our youth unemployment crisis, social ills, and other challenges. And as this portfolio committee, we have on numerous occasions given our commitment that we'll do everything in our power to work towards finding lasting solutions to these challenges. It is also against this background that our portfolio committee are extremely concerned that there's still no pronouncement in terms of a new NYDA board. And with the minister being present here today, I do hope that she will hear our appeal that this NYDA board process be finalized without further delay in this Youth Month. This morning, colleagues, we've got a very important engagement with Treasury. We seek to engage with them around gender responsive budgeting. How responsive is gender responsive budgeting? Are departments complying with these imperatives? Why is it that we're not making any headway seemingly in terms of the employment of additional social workers? And as we've discussed this morning, there seems to be very little funds available or resources available, not only to establish the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, but also generally in terms of the allocation that departments set aside in order to fight this national emergency. And of course, colleagues, during our oversight visits, we have seen the challenges around the Sanitary Dignity Program. And most concerning is that funds are allocated for this program, but then either not spent, returned to Treasury, or spent on something else. And these are some of the key issues that we would like to probe with Treasury this morning. So with those short few introductory remarks, Mr. Bidza, I will hand over to your delegation to take us through the presentation, please.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and honorable members. I'm going to let my colleague, Prudence, will take you through the first part of the presentation around gender-responsive budgeting, and then my colleague Yusuf Mayet will then take over and deal specifically with issues pertaining to funding and etc. So without wasting much time, over to you, Prudence.
Good morning, honorable members. I hope I am audible.
You are.
All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate the opportunity to come and provide an update on the gender-responsive budgeting reform. So between myself and Yusuf, we will be presenting an overview on gender-responsive budgeting implementation. We'll be speaking to the allocation on gender-based violence and femicide, and the funding overview on Sanitary Dignity Plan program, and progress on government's commitment to employ social workers. I will be covering the reform component of the presentation. Thank you. So the gender-responsive budgeting reform is one of the pillars identified in the gender-responsive planning, budgeting, monitoring, and evaluation framework, which was, as the portfolio committee knows, introduced in 2019. So upon the introduction of the framework, there were attempts to start collecting data to ascertain and quantify how much we're currently spending on the program, which is gender priorities and agenda. The request for the data from various departments was inadequate. What that then means is we did not have very good responses from the departments and the sectors. And upon close inspection, we realized that we needed to take a different approach to getting the data and the information that we require. We then wrote to the International Monetary Fund, which has a gender-responsive budgeting framework, and then we were introduced to the framework and the approach that we needed to implement to successfully introduce gender-responsive budgeting in the country. And then they were afforded us technical assistance for the development of the framework and consultation with other actors such as civil society and institutions of oversight like the FFC, as well as PBO and other departments. The roadmap in collaboration with the IMF intended to have practical steps of implementing the framework, looking at realistic timelines and how we can be able to build consensus on what and how this framework was going to be introduced in the country. We also use this as an opportunity for raising awareness on cross-cutting priorities, which are usually neglected by different departments because it is so broad and it is usually not measurable through the lens of one particular department. It is very hard to then get reporting or even quantifying the budget related to cross-cutting initiatives. And lastly, we wanted to integrate gender into the budgeting system, the PFM system. So what are the key roadmaps and key elements of this roadmap? They include a gender budget statement, one that we published for the first time with the 2025 budget. It includes gender disaggregated data on performance with indicators and targets that are related to gender. using a tagging system to be able to identify programs and policies that are responsive to gender needs. We also look at policy impact, having an ex-ante gender impact assessment or analysis at a later stage, implementing into the PFM system reporting mechanism for both financial and non-financial information. So what are these pillars that we note in the roadmap? We propose that we follow the framework that is provided in the GRPBMEF, which includes planning, reporting, monitoring, and evaluation, as well as budgeting. So we recognize that this rollout would not be immediate. We proposed a 3-phase gradual approach for the implementation of the roadmap. The timelines that were given were based on international experience, where you start with at least about 10 to 20 departments and then moving on to full rollout for all different sectors. Establishing a governance structure which has been in existence now for over 2 years, which is the National Treasury, DPME, and DWIPD. Having a capacity development, needs assessment, and be able to plan the policy and the formulation for vulnerable groups. Broader communication with different stakeholders were the key roadmap pillars that were identified. So in phase 1, we did establish that there was a gender needs assessment that already existed, because this is identified as a key pillar to being able to introduce such a reform. You need a gender needs assessment to determine where the gaps are, so that you're able to measure yourself over time if you're making progress. And the gender needs assessment that was done was based on what was introduced by the World Bank in partnership with DWIPD and other stakeholders. And then we started issuing GRB guidelines to the participating departments that were going to be selected to introduce the roadmap itself, and also establish a way of mainstreaming and training those participating in the process on what gender-responsive budgeting is. The intent that was also put in the MTF guidelines also mentioned that we will be tracking expenditure related to gender. And this was shown in our MTF guidelines as well as our E&E guidelines. In inculcating the roadmap, we needed to put the information about gender, not only in our guidelines, but expressly request departments to show what they're doing in their own submissions, and the involvement of DWIPD in some of the function group meetings as budgets are being discussed, so that they may notify the departments of where the gaps may lie in their particular sectors. The budget publication itself, as I've mentioned, we have our first gender budget statement that was published this year that has some of the departments that are responsive to this call. We are yet to introduce a reporting template that will show the spending that has been identified in the gender budget statement. The full rollout would then include all the steps we've already outlined in phase 1 and 2, but also learning from the successes and the failures, and being able to take in the lessons that we got over the past 2 years, identifying the required additional support and training, and adding to our standard chart of account an element of reporting that will be specific to gender, and then we'll be able to add more departments and do an impact assessment on those departments that have been participating. And also will report to Parliament as an oversight. In terms of the governance structure that has been formed, DWIPD, DPME, and States SA are part of the structure. We believe that for us to be able to measure properly, we need to know the statistics that have been taken and any gender disaggregated data that exists that we'll be able to measure if we are making any progress at all. The Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation are crucial for the purpose of planning because they are the ones who can provide a framework on how this policy can be implemented in our plans and our strategic plans and our annual performance plans. Also on the reporting side of non-financial information. So in year, annual reports must also include gender priorities. To be able to get that right, we need to be able to collaborate with the 3 departments mentioned here. It's important to note that there cannot be gender responsive budgeting if there are no gender responsive policies and gender responsive programs. The intent of the reform is to make sure that there is an overhaul, starting with each and every program in government, to have a lens that looks at their budget, looks at their policies, looks at their programs, and see the impact that it has on gender. And then we use existing mechanisms to be able to track any resources so that it may assist us to identify the gaps and quantify the amount and the resources that will be then required to fully make a difference. The gender needs assessment that was done by World Bank with the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities identified different pillars that needed to be addressed as they relate to gender. Some of these urgent priorities include human endowment, economic participation and opportunities, ownership and control over financial and non-financial assets, voice and agency. Because we are taking a phased approach in implementation gender responsive budgeting, we realized that we could not do all the pillars at the same time. We needed to start with one. And the governance structure, which includes DWIPD, DPME, and STATS, then identified economic participation and opportunities as the first pillar to be able to address, focusing on women empowerment. In the piloting, there were various departments that were selected. We were about 10 of them that have been identified by the same governance structure. Based on the gender needs assessment, we then issued a guideline that required participation by these departments in the tagging exercise. The tagging exercise intended to ascertain the amount that is being dedicated to these policy priorities. After the tagging exercise, we realized that the submission was also not as great as we would have liked it to be. After discussing and training the departments on the responses and how they should fill in the documentation, responses were not as good. The red part will show you what was not completed, and the green what was completed, and the yellow is partially completed. The departments that were responsive were DWIPD, Employment and Labor, DSEC, Human Settlements, DWIPD also attempted to respond. But some of them did not have programs that were responsive to the priorities of gender and women economic empowerment. The second round of the pilot, we also had the Department of Small Business and Development, which requested to be excluded from the tagging exercise, citing challenges of capacity and the transition in terms of their the change in the NMOG process. And then we had information that was incomplete, and some of the information was not submitted at all. What we realized from the gender budget statement that we eventually published with 5 of the departments is that the departments themselves needed information, needed to be trained more on how to do the analysis for them to complete the response and the tagging exercise well. We provided an update to the budget group DDGs We also did data verification with the departments themselves, just to go through their submissions, identify where the gaps existed. And then we realized that there's a need for workshopping, and through the Department of Planning Monitoring, Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, mainstreaming workshops were also held with the selected departments. Tagging guidelines were then developed and a tool enhanced to be able to accommodate all the gaps that we were identifying. The lessons that are key in this process is that there is a need for training, not just on gender on its own, but also identifying where the gaps are so that the responding departments and policymakers are aware of them. The knowledge gap makes it hard for the budgets or the policies and plans to be responsive. So if the budget, as I've mentioned before, if the policy is not responsive and their plans are not responsive, the budget would then not be responsive. The support is needed for their interventions and specific sector indicators so that they're able to measure progress for those specific departments. There is silo working between finance departments, which are meant to fill in this information as related to budget, versus oversight units for gender, like planning and M&E and gender focal points. There is a responsibility that is now given only to gender focal points to think about how they respond to gender issues, and it ends up being just about what the department is doing in terms of the number of representation of employees, instead of looking at the policies and how they impact the greater interventions for the department as a whole. So the silo working is really a hindrance to the full implementation of gender responsive budgeting. The tagging exercise has shown us limitations on things that we need to review and on concurrent functions. The reason why departments such as DHS do not have enough information is mainly because some of the activities happen at provincial level. So therefore, you cannot be able to get a full picture of the interventions without another sphere of government also being involved. And this is prevalent for most concurrent functions and needs to be considered as we roll out in the next phase, because it will not be the same for Department of Arts and Culture, Sports, Arts and Culture, because it does not have concurrent functions versus DHS. The data that was collected from policy departments may not be suitable for the format of the gender budget statement. This means that sometimes the information about interventions is very low. So it is not a program or sub-program, making it hard for it to be quantified or even put up to the level where everyone understands where it is going and there's an indicator related to it. Departments with concurrent function cannot be treated as those without. I've already mentioned that. The planning process is not aligned to specific requirements of the budgeting exercise. This means that while we are doing the gender needs assessment as a guide to be able to collect information on what is being budgeted for, the same is not being done on the planning side. So we need to be specific about what gap we're focusing on to be able to track it from planning to implementation and then eventually to monitoring and evaluation. What are the next steps for gender responsive budgeting? In the current year, we are informed by DWIPD that they're updating the gender needs assessment, and that will inform whether or not we continue with those identified gaps that we have already. We will be adding additional departments to the gender budget statement in the next round of 2026 MTF process. There will be continuous mainstreaming because the people who fill in the information about gender responsiveness should be able to understand the concept of gender and why it's important that it is mainstream through policy planning and budgeting. There's a need for support to be provided and interventions be identified for each and every one of the departments that will be selected, and engagement with provinces will also be able to assist us in preparation of the full rollout to the next sphere of government. It is important to note that we cannot be able to proceed to the next department, or even some of the recommendations that were made through the committees about the departments that we should add next. It all depends on the department's readiness, their understanding, and the mainstreaming that has been done to be able to proceed in tagging those departments. And otherwise, we'll just have another case like small business and development that will say they are not ready to respond to the process of tagging and gender budget and gender responsive budgeting. I will stop there and allow Yusuf to proceed. Thank you.
Thanks, Prudence, and greetings, Chairperson and honorable members. I'll be taking you through some of the budget allocations that's specifically tailored towards addressing gender-based violence and femicide. So firstly, I'd like to say that there are several allocations across government that address this issue, although the spending is not necessarily categorized as such. So this includes, for instance, your victim empowerment sub-program within your provincial departments of social development. This is allocated around 2.6 billion per annum over the next 3 years, for instance. And then it also includes your spending on Tutuzela care centers and implementation of various GBVF programs within the Department of Justice. This is allocated around 136.9 million over the next 3 years, and other various allocations that I'll take you through in the next slides as well. So this is speaking to the issue, I think, that came up earlier with respect to the Council for GBVF. Now, the National Council for GBVF is currently within the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, as we know. And the department is currently in consultation with our Public Entities Governance Unit within National Treasury on the process to formally establish the council. And the outcome of this process will essentially inform the costing of the council over the long term and the sustainability of that. In the interim, while we're working on the establishment of the council, the budget is allocated around 5 million per annum, located within the department's sub-program of social empowerment of women sub-program. Then one of the other allocations, Chairperson, is the allocation within SAPS, or South African Police Service. The South African Police Service has strengthened its response to GBVF through targeted interventions, including your victim-friendly services at police stations, and also the widespread establishment of what we call your community police forums. These initiatives aim to enhance responsiveness to GBVF cases, improve community involvement in crime prevention, as well as foster a safer and more supportive environment for victims. If, for instance, sorry, I'm still on the previous slide. For instance, between 2022 and 2022-23 and 2024-25, SAPS has invested 221.7 million to strengthen family violence, child protection, and sexual offences. That's your FCS units within SAPS. Next slide, please. So then over the medium term, Chairperson, an additional 150 million has been reprioritized towards GBVF interventions and to expand the capacity of these FCS units, also within the SAPS budget. This amount is over and above existing baseline allocations to the relevant cost centers. Then an evidence-based approach, which is anchored at continued investment in these FCS units, remains central to efforts aimed at reducing GBVF in alignment with your national strategic plan on GBVF as well. And this is also talking towards a critical partnership between SAPS and NPA that ensures expert and expedited processes of forensic evidence in prioritized GBVF cases. So these interventions that I've mentioned above are implemented within the Detective Services Program within SAPS, which has a budget of around 75.2 billion over the next 3 years. Next slide. So within the Department of Justice, Chairperson, the department seeks to provide victims of gender-based violence, sex crimes, as well as the relatives of femicide victims with a range of support services that are aimed at ensuring their court experience is free from any form of secondary victimization. And this is a requirement as per Article 13 of the Declaration of the Presidential Summit against GBVF. So the department plans to do so by increasing number of fully operational Tutuzela care centers that I've referred to earlier as well. So Tutuzela care centers provide victims of sexual offenses with 24-hour access to relevant services, including your police, your counseling, doctors, court preparation officers, as well as prosecutors. So this plan to increase your Tutuzela care centers from 66 in 24-25 to up to 72 Tutuzela care centers in 2027-28 at a projected cost of 15 million over the next 3 years. Then plans are also underway to appoint 15 additional personnel at these Tutuzela care centers, including site coordinators, victim assistant officers, as well as state advocates at an estimated cost of around 27.5 million over the next 3 years. Furthermore, over the medium term, an additional 53 sexual offense courts will be established, particularly in your rural areas. And the department intends to upgrade a total of 108 district courts as well to offer services that are custom made for survivors of domestic violence. So in this regard, a budget of 22.4 million is set aside for these initiatives over the next 3 years. Next slide. So finally, also within this department is the establishment of disability-centric justice system, where the department will also resource 300 courts with wheelchairs, accessible educational products, and other resources required for provision of reasonable accommodations tailored towards victims with disabilities, for instance. So it'll also introduce a 100 days challenge to reduce backlog matters of sexual offenses, domestic violence, maintenance and divorce, and improved management of the National Register for Sexual Offenders to ensure strict vetting of individuals working with vulnerable populations. In this regard, a total of 72 million is set aside for these activities over the next 3 years. So this, Chairperson, is a summary of the Victim Empowerment Sub-Program that I mentioned earlier that lies within your provincial Department of Social Development. Over here, we see that this allocation is around 810.7 million in 2024-25, growing to 874.9 million over in 2027-28. And this includes various activities with respects to GBVF, including your shelters for victims, for instance, as well, that the department funds. Next slide, please. Then, Chairperson, with regards to your progress made with government's commitment to employ more social workers, we know, for instance, that your provincial departments of social development employ a total of around 25,000 personnel, of which around 10,000 of that is your social workers. About around 2,400 is your auxiliary social workers, and it also includes your employment of youth workers as well as community development workers as well. Because we do have some trouble with respect to the data and categorization of your different types of workers, which makes it difficult to view the trend over a number of years. But this is a summary of what the picture looks like. Provinces are progressing slowly in terms of appointing more social workers, citing fiscal constraints among other challenges. However, provinces are currently focusing on filling replacement posts of those that are exiting the system. Your provincial DST budgets have been under significant pressure, especially post-COVID. Sorry, next slide. Okay, so over the MTEF, with respect to employment of social workers, we have had in the past a social worker employment grant, which was since transferred to the equitable share, and that allocation is around 896 million. That's within the equitable share. That's towards the employment of social workers. What the provinces would have received if the employment grant continued, but it's still allocated to provinces through the provincial equitable share. Next slide. So we know and recognize that there's still an issue with regards to unemployed social worker graduates, with provinces are sort of um, trying to address within the fiscal within fiscal current fiscal constraints, notwithstanding the current pressures within provincial budgets as well. As of 30th April 2025, all provinces reported social worker to population ratios below their norms. So we know that there are certain norms for number of social workers per population, and a lot of provinces are below that. The situation is better in certain provinces, for instance, Northern Cape, Eastern Cape, and Free State, where the ratio is a bit better. The highest estimated shortfall of social workers, however, is observed in Gauteng, Mpumalanga, and KZN. So we do have an existing strategy for employment of social work professionals that the Department of Social Development has brought to us and presented to Cabinet in February 2024. However, Treasury did identify several issues with the current strategy that require further work. For instance, a lot of methodological issues that the department still needs to work on getting accurate data as well with respects to the gap of social workers. So this slide, Chairperson, looks at your current picture or looking at the trend of social workers rather from 2019-20 up to 2023-24 within provincial departments of social development. So we see that provincial departments of social development employed around 10,800 social workers back in 2019-20, and this number has somewhat deteriorated up to 2023-24, which is somewhat worrying, something that we would want to address as well. Next slide. This is a better picture or a broad picture of the shortfall that I mentioned earlier, Chairperson. If we look at the targeted ratios versus what the ratios should be in each of your provinces, the last column shows you the current shortfall projected, which shows you in terms of your norm ratios, the number of social workers that we should be having per population in each province. What's the estimated shortfall in that regard? So we see as a total for the country, our estimated shortfall currently in terms of the norm ratio is around 7,600 social workers shortfall. Next slide, please. Moving on, Chairperson, to the funding overview of the Sanitary Dignity Program. We do know that there is a sustainable budget baseline that is earmarked for your Sanitary Dignity Program. That's as outlined in the Sanitary Dignity Implementation Framework. So these amounts are allocated to provincial government through the Provincial Equitable Share in the Division of Revenue Act. The amount, Chairperson, is allocated proportionally based on the number of girl learners per province in your quintile 1 to 3 schools, which is classified as your poorer schools, for instance. So this is what the allocation or the distribution of that given allocation is based on across your provinces. So across provinces, the implementing departments differ. In some provinces, it's implemented by our Department of Social Development, whereas in other provinces, it's implemented by our Department of Education. Your average total for your Sanitary Dignity Program is almost 270 million per annum over the next 3 years. Next slide. So this as I said, this is the broad budget baseline for your Sanitary Dignity Program. As I mentioned, it's allocated through your provincial equitable share. It's growing more or less in line with inflation over the next few years, and as I mentioned, allocated proportionally according to your number of girl learners per province in your poorer schools. Next slide. As a chairperson mentioned earlier as well, the issue is that the baseline, although the baseline is there for a Sanitary Dignity Program, there are various challenges with respects to spending that allocation. So what we see from this slide is that a total of 160.4 million or 22.5% against the total allocation has actually been returned to provincial treasuries in respect of this Sanitary Dignity Program over the past 3 financial years. And Eastern Cape, Free State, and Northern Cape, as well as Northwest, are the major contributors to this underspending. Whereas Gauteng and Western Cape returned funds only in 2023-24 in 2024-25 respectively. So with respect to challenges, provinces cite various challenges, mostly procurement delays, capacity issues, and as challenges with distribution mechanisms that's inhibiting proper spending on this particular allocation. Next slide, please. That's the end of what we had to address, Chairperson. I'll hand over back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this presentation. I am now going to allow honourable members to engage with the presentation. Honourable members, now is your opportunity. Please raise your hands. I only see one hand. Would honourable members not like to engage? I see 2 hands, 3 hands. Okay, let's take one round. It will be the Honourable Adams, followed by the Honourable Kanhile, followed by the Honourable Spies, followed by the Honourable Chauke Adonis, and then we'll take a second round after that. Oh, I see Honourable Mabel's hand as well. Okay, let's go. We'll take a first round, and then Honourable Mabel will be the first person in the second round. So Honourable Adams, over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. And my apologies for not opening my camera. Chairperson, good morning to yourself, to the members on the group, the presenters, our staff, and let me also thank the department for the Chairperson. Allow me to raise some questions or clarity-seeking questions. My first one will be, the presentation shows that there is an allocation of funds to address GBVF. Is there any impact assessment done to monitor what is being done with the allocation funding and its impact to the intended beneficiaries? How is the gender responsive budgeting integrated into national, provincial, and municipal budget processes? And how are gender needs assessments conducted during the budgeting process? And how has GRB affected services delivery in key sectors such as health, education, and social development? And my last one, have any evaluation or case studies demonstrated success or failure in GRB implement? I think there's one more, Chair. Let me just check. Yeah. The presentation shows that gender needs assessments are done by the Department of Women, Youth, Persons with Disability. How are gender needs assessments conducted during the budgeting processes? I thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Honourable Adams. Honourable Kanhile.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, I'm having a very weak network here. Apologies for not switching on the video. Greetings to you, greetings to the department and all protocol observed. Chair, in your opening remarks, you mentioned something about the appointment of the NYDA board. I share the same sentiments as yourself, that it would be very nice to witness the president appointing the board members now during the excuse me, during the youth month, and also considering that we finalized this process, if I'm not mistaken, around March, the interviews processes, but 3 months later, the board members have not been appointed. So we are hoping that the president is going to use this opportunity considering that this is the Youth Month, to ensure that we have the board in place. Chair, I'm going to go to the issue of National Council. I have noted Mr. Yusuf where he mentioned that the process currently, it is still at a consultation stage about the outcome of the establishment of the National Council on Gender-Based Violence. And during his presentation, he also mentioned something about an allocation of 5 million rands. I just want to understand if this 5 million is going to be allocated to our portfolio, because I remember there was a line item that spoke to 5 million also in the previous budget. But I just want to understand if this one will solely be focusing on funding the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. And I want to also go on the issue of the Sanitary Dignity Program. We have received a number of reports, and to date, it has been very clear. It is very clear that the sanitary dignity packs, they are not reaching the girl learners in terms of how it's done and whatnot. And you have, as you have indicated, Chairperson, that some of this money or this budget is not actually used for what it is meant for. I want to find out from the Treasury if it's possible to ring fence this budget when they release it to the respective provinces, because I believe that if that is done, we are going to be able to achieve what we want to achieve in terms of ensuring that the sanitary towels, they reach the girl learners. I think I'm going to pause here for now, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Angel. Kanyile, Honourable Spies.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Am I audible?
You are, Honourable Spies. Thank you.
Okay. Chair, I think firstly, Councillor, Honourable Kanyile mentioned, and specifically with reference to Mr. Mayet's presentation, which also was something that sort of caught me, that he mentioned that there is still they are still in discussions on the estimated budget and costs when it comes to the GBV Council. And so when he said that, it sort of hit me to ask the question, is that it looks like we're doing things the wrong way around, that it's we're doing things in the wrong order. And that is just an observation, because we are at a point where we now, for instance, are putting out an advert. The work needs to start, but then there is this comment made that there's still discussions on the establishment or estimated budget and departments and so on. So it's just a comment that I wanted to make, and maybe I just understood him incorrectly, and maybe he can give clarity. So, Chair, for me, without even going into every detail that was, presented to us, and I want to thank the presenters for the presentation, I think the core for me is the lessons that will, the lessons learned and what comes out and what stands out, because if those lessons are the things that we could focus on, overall, things will go better in the departmental. For instance, on page 18, page 18 speaks about lessons from phase 1. It talks about the issues of specific capacities of departments. And so my question would be then to the presenters is that after everything that you have now observed and all the data and the research that you have done, what would you then say? What sort of support and training would departments need? For instance, to complete the workbook and to link it to the gender gap. and particularly in the context of women empowerment. How is it that one can ensure that departments have a very solid understanding of the gender issues and their implications in order for us to have policy and budget development? Those to me are key, Chair. And then following that, then I would like to ask the department, what do they see as strategies that can be used to address the knowledge gap on the gender issues, to ensure that the policies, the plans, and the budget, the responsive, and the budgets are indeed responsive to the gender needs, and the kind of support that NT, the National Treasury, can actually give in developing these interventions. And then with regards to, that's my last one, is the interdepartmental collaboration. To me, that is a huge concern, and it was, in fact, hugely highlighted by the presenters. And the fact that they work in silos. And again, I want to ask, what is it that they think can be done to break those silos between finance, planning, gender focal points, and program managers, to just ensure, Chair, that there is a more integrated approach towards gender responsive budgeting, but also gender mainstreaming as a whole. So how does the department see us, themselves, and other departments facilitate better communication and working together with stakeholders, departments, in terms of gender responsive planning? And I think if they can just maybe tell us what is their thinking around it, what is the strategies that they think one should be employed in terms of this. And that, to me, Chair, thank you very much, is the key to all of this. Once we get that right, I do believe things will look better, because the presentation points out lots of planning, lots of plans, lots of effort and work being put in. It's been told how much money there's been allocated across departments, but somehow it's that breaking down of silos, the fact that there is no integrated collaboration within departments, and that to me is a big concern. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honourable Spies. Can I check if the Honourable Chauke Adonis would like to ask questions?
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and greetings to honorable members and also to the representatives from the department and also the minister that is on the platform with us. Chairperson, I think from my side, just appreciating the presentation that has been presented before us. And also, just before I proceed, Chairperson, if you can please allow me to keep my camera off. I am not in a favorable environment in terms of my background.
No problem, Honourable Webb. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. In appreciating the presentation, one would also, as alluded by my fellow colleagues as well, some of the concerns that we are raising, especially centered around the gender responsive budgeting. And I think when we speak about the gender responsive budgeting, one would want to really have an unpacked interpretation in terms of what the monitoring matrix or tool is being implemented and utilized, number one. Number two, in terms of the planning, what is the coordination in terms of planning with other departments, or an interdepartmental planning strategy for gender responsive budgeting? And I do take note that in the presentation, it is alluded that this is the responsibility of the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities. And really, one would want to find out to what extent is there consultation with other departments to really identify where the areas of gender responsive budgeting is needed in the various departments, but also how far does it go down in terms of consultation and its impact when it comes to provinces and local municipalities? Because the last thing you'd want to do, and I see it's not reflective in the presentation, is an overview of the impact and the monitoring and evaluation of the impact of the gender responsive budgeting at a local point of view. So looking at how this is interpreted from a municipal point of view and also in provinces. Chairperson, a question I would have, and I think it's quite a concern, it would be the returning of unspent budgets. And I think one would want to know which are the provinces that are continuous perpetrators of this. What are the reasons that are stipulated for the underspending of the budgets that are allocated, whether it's gender responsive budget allocation, whether it is the budget allocation for the Sanitary Dignity program? Which provinces are the ones that are the biggest perpetrators of this? What are the reasons that are given? And what are some of the intervention strategies that are put in place with those provinces, those departments, and the Department of Treasury, seeing that the Department of Treasury is responsible for allocating the budget directly to the provinces without it coming to the Department of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities? The third one, Chairperson, would be in terms of the overview, or perhaps is for me to really understand from Treasury side. Has there been any consultation or research that has been conducted with the Department of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities in looking at various strategies of how budget can be allocated to the department, and from the department then obviously disseminated or distributed amongst provinces? Because we are finding that this Sanitary Dignity program, the Department of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities are the custodians of the program, but are not the direct recipients of the budgets that are allocated, and they are not the direct disseminators or distributors of the budget. But then there's an expectation that they must play an oversight monitoring responsibility. And one would want to say that this is quite challenging. And what has been the intervention and the interaction between Treasury and the Department of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities? And what is the possibility of this budget being directly allocated to the Department of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities that would give them better oversight in terms of how the funds are being distributed, how they are being utilized, and also putting in place a monitoring and evaluation monitoring tool? Chairperson, also when it comes to gender responsive budgeting, I'm going to go to gender responsive budgeting now. We look at the various provinces and the complexities that persist or exist in our 9 provinces. There are not, there are some similarities, but there are those that are unique in some provinces. What are some of those that have been identified where perhaps in terms of the strategies that are centered around gender responsive budgeting might require more intervention and budget allocation per province, per municipality, per district, etc., that have been identified? And also, what are some of the interventions in terms of training and capacity building in municipalities and in provinces in order for us to ensure that the budgets that are being allocated are adequately being utilized? We do not find budgets that are being underspent, but also there is a monitoring tool that is put in place for consequence management. And then the last part, Chairperson, would be what consequence management is put in place for the provinces and the municipalities that are not compliant when it comes to meeting the targets for gender responsive budgeting and their allocations? And what are those targets, if we can perhaps have what the targets are? And also, what are the consequences for the provinces that are not meeting the targets when it comes to the Sanitary Dignity program? The last part, sorry, Chairperson, I know I said the last part, and I think that has already been echoed by my colleagues, would be on the element of this 5 million, I think it's provisional allocation of 5 million rand for the Gender-Based Violence Femicide Council. What does this look like? What exactly is it being allocated to be utilized on? For how long has it been budgeted for? Over a spread of 12 months, 24 months, 3 years? And what are the plans of Treasury in terms of capacitating this particular council to have adequate resource allocated for its full, administrative and also program implementation plans? And I think one must echo the sentiments to say it's unfortunate that this council it's meeting one of the biggest pandemics, greatest pandemics that we are faced with as a country, but yet the resources that are being allocated are not sufficient. And the last part on that one would be what could be done as part of intervention and strategies with other departments to, provide resources and support to the Gender-Based Violence Council. And I think this will speak to the relevant departments such as the Department of Basic Education, Higher Education, Health, and other department. What has the consultation been, and what are some of the interventions that perhaps might be already in place or in the pipelines? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much to the whip, Honourable Mabel. I will take you now. Can you hear us, Mklonishwa?
Yes, you have disabled my video. I don't know who's disabled it, but
I'm not the guilty party, but apologies anyway, Mama. Please proceed.
okay, thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, I would like to ask some few questions from the presentation that we received. My first question, Honorable Chair, why has the gender responsive budgeting framework adopted in 2019 still not been institutionalized across all departments by 2025? And what enforcement mechanisms are in place to ensure compliance? And what deadlines have been set to achieve full implementation? My second question, what has the department done to operationalize the National Council on GBVF since the Act was signed into law in 2024? And why is the council still not functional, despite the government's public commitment to establish it urgently? My third question, over 21 billion has been allocated across departments for GBVF initiatives, yet there is no operational coordinating structure. Who is currently accountable for ensuring this money is used efficiently and in line with the National Strategic Plan? Fourth question, the department has constantly committed to absorbing unemployment social work graduates through the social sector strategy. Given that over 7,000 social workers are still needed nationwide, what has the department done to ensure provinces fill the posts? My fifth question, provinces have returned 160.4 million in unspent sanitary dignity funds in the last 3 years. What direct intervention has the department made to address poor implementation? And why are many indigent girls still not receiving free sanitary pads? Sixth question, given that the department finalized the sanitary dignity M&E framework in 2022, how has this applied to enforce provincial compliance and improve delivery, especially in underperforming provinces such as Eastern Cape and Northwest? Seventh question, how is the department working with National Treasury to ensure that all line departments report gender disaggregated budget data as promised in 2023 budget guidelines? and reiterated in the 2025 Gender Budget Statement Pilot. My last question, Honorable Chair. What accountability mechanisms are in place for provinces that repeatedly underspend on GBVF, social worker hiring, or menstrual health programs, despite national policy commitment and budget allocation? That's my take. I submit, Honorable Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, honorable colleague. I'm going to hand over back to Treasury to give us some responses, and then we will take a second round of questions if members want to ask follow-up questions. So back to you, Mr. Bitsa.
Thanks very much, Chairperson and honorable members. There were several questions, mainly focusing on the GRB, and some questions which are expenditure related. Because most questions tended to be more on the GRB, I'm going to allow my colleague, Ms. Sheila Tipe and Prudence, to address all GRB related questions. Thereafter, my colleague Yusuf and Desire and myself will attempt to address all expenditure related questions. I just wish to also indicate, Honorable Chair, most of the province related underspending or related questions, we do have colleagues from IGR, but unfortunately those colleagues have not yet joined us here. We're trying them to join the meeting as well, but we will attempt to answer those questions as best as we can. Over to you, Sheila and Prudence, to address GRB related questions.
Thank you. Thank you, honorable members, for the questions. They're all well noted, even the comments. I will start on the last few ones and go back up. So why hasn't implementation taken place even though the framework was introduced in 2019? The main lesson for us during this period between 2019 and 2025 is that compliance will not be enforced through an instruction. So just sending out a guideline and requesting information is not sufficient. And hence we had to take a different approach of doing a roadmap to introduce the concept of mainstreaming gender responsive budgeting. We envisage that in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll be able to add more departments as awareness is being raised and mainstreaming is taking place. It is not possible for the implementation to be done without the capacitation of the different sectors and departments. That is what we are learning over the period that we have been implementing this. The guidelines were referring to a request for specific departments, meaning that it was mainly for the selected departments, not for all the departments, and hence the response was specific to them. However, even from the 10 that have been selected before, not all of them responded because the framework itself, it is not something that we are able to enforce as the National Treasury, but the DWIPD are the ones who are overseeing the framework for gender planning, budgeting, monitoring, and evaluation framework. The question about the gender needs assessment methodology that was followed. This will differ from the service provider who actually conducts the assessment itself. It is worth noting that a gender needs assessment cannot be done on an annual basis. It requires time and it can only be done over a period of time. So the one that we're using now, I believe it was for 2020, 2021. So the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities have since approached the HSRC, which is the service provider this time around, to do an updated one. So it is not done on an annual basis, and therefore it is not conducted during the budget process itself. What can be done by us? What do we recommend that we do to be able to bridge the gaps, the silo working, and the institutional understanding by the different sectors? We have said this to DWIPD that we need to prioritize training. They need to take the lead. The National Treasury is not a gender expert department, but we're more of a budgeting department. So we implore on the department as the policy lead to take up the course of training, mainstreaming, sensitizing all the different sectors as we roll out the gender responsive budgeting so that they prioritize the training and the understanding. When this is done well, you find that the policies will be responsive. And when the policies are responsive, the programs will be responsive. And the people who work in the different units, including
Are you
planning.
done with the disclosure for DM?
Ms. Mpondo, you are unmuted. Mute yourself.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the question about the silo working, we believe that when the training is done and everyone understands the role of the policymaker, and then the people who are in planning will be able to identify the different policy initiatives and intervention. In that way, they'll be able to track it and be able to plan better and have better indicators, and in turn will have better line items for budgeting that will be responsive to that intervention. So the training is not only for the officials who fill in the training, the tracking mechanisms or the monitoring, but the training needs to start from the top, from the policymakers, so that every policy is actually evaluated on the merits of what it does as an impact on the ground for the needs of the different genders. The question about the impact assessment, the National Treasury would not be the one to implement that. It would have to be the sector lead who would have to do an analysis, looking back at what they have identified as their gaps, and then reflecting on that and doing an analysis. And to our knowledge, that has not yet been done. The question about an impact on municipal level and provinces has not yet been done as well. It's important to note that while there are programs and other provinces that are more responsive in terms of gender, we have not included them in the gender needs in the gender budget statement this time around, but there are plans to be able to initiate that process and take them along so that we're able to quantify both national spending for gender needs as well as the provincial gaps. Because as I've mentioned, the impact would not be the same and the response would not be the same when you compare the national interventions to the provincial interventions. This is in line with the question about health and education. We have not yet rolled out to the provinces to be able to get that kind of data, but we have been speaking to Department of Basic Education about the policies that have an impact on gender to be able to quantify how much is spent on the policy side on that. On the question about what do people need to know first and what do they need, what needs to be prioritized, we believe that the departments don't know the gaps. So it's very difficult to respond to something you do not know. I think in general, there is an understanding that there is a gender-based violence gap that a crisis that we're dealing with in the country. But I do not think that all the other key gaps have been identified and also tracked with the different departments so they can see how they respond to human endowment, voice and agency. How does agriculture look at empowerment from that lens? So the gender gaps are not known. Mainstreaming is not done in a way that enables the departments themselves to identify themselves in the gaps. So that's what we think is missing in the process. I think I've covered most of the questions. If I have not, I've forgotten something, please bear with me and just put it in the chat or I will respond. Thank you.
Thanks, Prudence. Over to you, Yusuf.
Thanks, Mashudu, and thank you, Chairperson. I'll be addressing the issue about underspending and poor performance on the Sanitary Dignity Program. So,
Hi, Lala.
Please
so,
proceed, Mayet. I'm sorry.
So National Treasury does have a representative on the task team that is led by the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, a task team that convenes on a quarterly basis on the Sanitary Dignity Program. And this is part of monitoring and monitoring the implementation of the particular program. In addition to this, National Treasury continue to include the Sanitary Dignity Program in their yearly provincial budget visits. During these visits, the Department of Women is also actively engaged in these discussions, and these discussions are particularly aimed at identifying and addressing challenges and areas of underperformance with respects to this Sanitary Dignity Program. Looking at some of the issues that were particular issues around underspending and some of the problematic issues, looking at particular problems, for instance, Eastern Cape, a lot of the past underspending was due to delays in procurement processes, as I mentioned, which is an issue that has been across many provinces across past years, an issue of underspending within this Sanitary Dignity Program. And this is like delays in your bid specification issues, delays in your bid committee sitting on time, for instance. And for Eastern Cape in 2023-24, underspending occurred as due to delays in the awarding of the tender and the capacity of service providers to deliver on time. So once they award the tender, also service providers sometimes have delays in procurement. That's also delaying the spending in that regard. Although a couple of provinces in 2024-25, for instance, your Eastern Cape and Free State did report particular savings because they were able to, or service providers were able to procure the sanitary dignity packs at a discounted value, for instance, at the same quantity that they aim to, which was an actual saving, not an underspending in 2024-25. So just looking at some of the aspects that talk to the underspending in addressing that question. I'll leave it at that for now, Chair. Thank you.
Can I check if there are any further responses, Mr. Bitsa?
Thanks very much. Let me just check with my colleague, Desire. Do you have any input to add from your side?
Thank you, Mashudu, and morning, everyone. Morning, Chair, and morning, all members. The questions that I'll be basically focusing on was in relation to the GBV Council and the 5 million allocation. So within the Department of Women's baseline, the department has been allocated 5 million over the MTEF to deal with activities related to GBV. So what happens that since from 2021, the Department of Women and National Treasury and DPSA had an engagement because of, we've noticed that the council process was taking long. Then what happened is that the DPSA advised the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, they need to form an interim secretariat, which will basically be dealing with all the GBV issues related in the interim while we are still waiting for the establishment of the council. So the 5 million that is being mentioned by Mr. Mayet on the presentation is there within the baseline of the Department of Women. So basically the 5 million is mainly responsible for the payment of COE compensation for the 4 personnel that have been appointed within the interim secretaries, and the other remaining amount is basically for any other related matters related to GBV. Thank you. That's all from my side.
Thanks very much, Chair. That's pretty much from our side, but I just wish to add that from our side at National Treasury, we continue, of course, to engage with the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities around the budgets. And in the coming month or so, we will be starting the budget process for the 2026 NTF. And some of these issues that you are raising, especially around capacitation and capacity issues within the department, those are some of the issues that we will be dealing with through the budget process that is going to unfold soon. But from our side so far, Chairperson, that's pretty much our responses so far. Over to you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bitsa. Can I check? Okay, I do see the hand of the Honorable Chake Adonis, but can I see if there are any further hands for follow-ups? Because I also see the hand of Honorable Mabel.
The Commander-in-Chief organization.
Honorable
Honorable
Mabel? Is that a legacy hand?
Chair, no, it's an old hand.
Okay. Colleagues, if you do want to ask any follow-up questions, then you can raise your hands now. But I think I want to start with the 5 million, and I've heard the explanation that it's set aside for now for the department to pay the salaries. But quite clearly, the 5 million is not going to be adequate for this council to be able to be fully functional and able to meet its mandate. So my question really is, I know the department has approached Treasury in order to seek some type of solution for additional funds to be made available. And will Treasury assist our department to ensure that there's adequate resources to ensure that this council is able to function optimally? Because quite clearly 5 million is not going to be enough. Then Honourable Angel mentioned the issue of the ring-fencing of funding for the Sanitary Dignity Programme. But again, I hear the challenges that are mentioned by Treasury, but surely we cannot just, because there's a slide that says Northern Cape spent their budget for sanitary dignity to augment the budget pressure relating to compensation of employees. So in other words, what is the thinking around how can we make sure, A, that funds that are allocated are spent correctly and spent on what it is envisaged for? Because we cannot be giving money from Treasury to these provinces and then they decide to spend it on something else. And Honourable Angel specifically asked about ring fencing that funding. Then the shortfall of the 7,000 social workers, in my view, is a crisis, because we cannot be saying we want to win the war against gender-based violence, against social ills and other issues. And then we've got thousands and thousands and thousands of social workers sitting at home. They've been trained by the state and they are not being absorbed. Now, I did see the slide said there was a problem with the plan that social development presented. So I just wanted to get an indication what was the issue with this plan that they presented in 2024. Considering also that there was already a cabinet resolution in 2018 that said key departments, whether it's education, health, social development, must absorb these social workers. So it's quite interesting then that 6 years later, there's still a problem with a plan that they presented. If I can just be given an indication on what the challenges was with this plan. Then, with regard to the gender-responsive budgeting framework, if departments are not clear on what is expected of them, are we to assume that this policy is weak and ineffective and it needs to be reviewed? And what are the gender priorities that these pilot departments set for themselves and what were they determined? If I can just be given an indication. Also, with regards to the no data that was provided by the Department of Basic Education and Tourism, it means then that they had no application of gender priorities to begin with. And maybe we can also get a response from our own department in this regard. Because again, it seems that there's no accountability here. There's no data, they're not complying with the policy, and it's just business as usual. So, and I wanted to know, with regards to the next 5 departments that will be piloted, can you give me an indication on which 5 departments will be the next 5 departments? And maybe I want to ask our department, I think you've long forgotten about the Women Empowerment and Gender Equity Bill, but I wonder how much of the problems that we are facing today would have been addressed had that bill actually come to Parliament and had been dealt with. So maybe the Minister can just give a response in that regard. Our whip.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And I think appreciating the responses as well. I've been greatly covered by your follow-up questions. And I think one of the things, just to add on to what you've already alluded to in terms of my thinking as well, is that I'm not getting a response on who is accountable and what is the consequence management framework that is put in place, especially for the departments that are not complying when it comes to the gender responsive budgeting allocation to the departments that and provinces that are returning or underspending budgets. And also, what then happens, as you have alluded, Chairperson, to the provinces where a finance is being allocated but are not being utilized as intended. And I think that's quite important for us to really get a sense of what are the consequence management tools that are put in place, and how do we ensure that there is a high level of accountability. I think also, Chairperson, from the presentation that we have received, one must really express a dissatisfaction. And I think the presentation that was brought before us, in as much as I have an appreciation for it, one gets a sense that there is not a lot of effort that is put into it in terms of really responding to the outcry of society, really responding to the outcry in terms of how do we ensure that we are addressing gender-based violence and femicide, how do we ensure that we are meeting gender equity targets that have been set, and also how do we ensure that the department in its planning, when it comes to these three areas of focus in today's presentation, are contributing to meeting the targets of the NDP. Chairperson, another concern that I'm really having, it would be speaking to municipalities. And I think municipalities have a huge responsibility in combating gender-based violence, in addressing issues of distribution of sanitary dignity program, and also the accountability measures. Once the perhaps if they can take us through the process, just as a layman's person, to say, once Treasury has allocated their budget, and we have taken note that the budget is allocated between social development and basic education. Once it's allocated to those departments in provinces, what then is done to follow the track of what happens to those resources or those funds? And also, what type of model is being utilized in order for us to follow a procurement process? We have raised this as a portfolio committee to say that it is outlined in terms of what the prerequisites are for service providers in terms of the procurement requirements that are not being met in provinces. One of the provinces that we can, recite, where we had an opportunity as a portfolio committee to do oversight on, was KZN. When it comes to the sanitary dignity program, where only one company was awarded the procurement of the sanitary dignity program of over 80 million rand. And this was a male-run organization or company. How can we ensure, as Treasury, what is put in place to ensure that through the procurement processes, we are empowering women, youth, and persons with disabilities to become service providers, and ensure that those who are given, who are allocated or awarded the procurement, are meeting the prescribed targets? The last one would be in terms of how do we assign in provinces. I know some provinces can have it under social development, others under basic. What is being utilized, or what formula is being utilized to determine which department in provinces is allocated the responsibility of the sanitary dignity program? And perhaps lastly, just to echo, which are the new 5 additional departments that will be brought on by the Department of Treasury, and what reinforcement in terms of mechanism tool is going to be put in place to ensure that we mitigate what has been experienced in the past as part of risk analysis or risk management, and what are some of the risks that we have foreseen, and what are the interventions that are put in place to mitigate those? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much, Honorable Chauke Adonis. I see the hand of Honorable Adams.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I just have a few questions, and it's as follows. Have any evaluation or case studies demonstrated success or failure to GRB implementation And then is there sufficient capacity and training amongst public servants to carry out GRB effectively and ensure that it is used for the intended purpose? And then, is there any consequence management for the provinces that have underspent their budget that is allocated to them? And the last one, are there any plans to expand the program to remote areas that are dominated by disadvantaged households? I thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Honourable Adams. Okay, I'm going to hand back to Treasury to give us responses, but please do focus on consequence management. It's something that members really want to hear.
Yeah. No, thanks very much, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members, for the follow-up. Indeed, I will attempt to address the issue of consequence management. So I'm going to address some few questions, and I will let my colleague Yusuf to come in, especially on the question related to the issue of the plan to absorb social workers, and then other GRB related questions. I will invite my colleague Prudence to come after me. Let me, Chair, first address your question or your comment on the 5 million rand allocation to the National Council. That is not sufficient. We note your comment, Chairperson, and we will have discussion with the department, as I said, when we embark on the new budget process for the 2026 MTF budget to look how best we can accommodate the department to capacitate the council. You will note, Chairperson, that despite the constrained fiscal environment in the 2025 budget, there has been a provision of around 71.7 million to the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disability. And this was through some internal reprioritization from other departments to support the departments to these many issues that it's faced with. And we note your comment around the insufficiency of the 5 million rand that is for the council currently. The other question that you have raised, or that has been raised quite strongly, Chairperson, is the issue of ring fencing of the allocation for sanitary dignity program, so that the money is not used for other purposes. We note your comment, and yes, the PFMA and the Appropriation Acts and DORA, they do make provisions for us to ring fence these fundings, and we will strongly consider that. We will engage with our colleagues from the IGR within Treasury and provincial treasuries as well to implement some of these suggestions that you are making around the ring fencing of this funding towards the SDP. On the issue of consequence management, yes, honorable members, we do implement consequence management, especially to either underspending departments or provinces that underspend their budget generally. During the budget process, if we do what is called baseline analysis, sometimes even detailed spending reviews of certain programs, and where, for example, we identify persistent underspending, especially from province X, we do make some suggestion to reprioritize funds to best performing provinces, but we also take into account the issue of capacity of certain provinces to deliver on certain mandates. And through quarterly IYM or monitoring and engagements with certain provinces, we do, as National Treasury, provide capacity to provincial treasuries as well as part of our monitoring of expenditure during the year. But where the problem persists endlessly, then we do take decisions to reprioritize funds from poor performing provinces to those who are delivering on their mandate. So that is the mechanism that from our side we do have it. But before we do that during the year, we do monitor and engage those provinces that are failing to deliver on their mandate and see where we can intervene with provincial treasuries to support those provinces so that they can deliver. But where the problem persists, then through baseline analysis and expenditure reviews, then we do take some decisions as part of consequence management from our side. Other consequence management, they relay either within provinces or to the accounting officers of those respective departments, where then accounting officer in terms of the PFMA, they are empowered to then take decisions, even executive authorities, where the transgressors are accounting officers. Maybe Yusuf, you can come in and then we can hand over to Prudence on other GRB related questions.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Prudence, let Yusuf come in and then you will close this round of questions.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'll be attempting to address the question on the social worker employment and the issues with the current strategy that was presented to Cabinet in 2024. So notwithstanding the fiscal constraints that's inhibiting provinces from employing additional social workers, we did identify some issues within the strategy that's sort of inhibiting proper workforce planning with respects to social workers. And this is largely due to the lack of accurate data on social workers to compare those social workers that are currently employed versus the demand of social workers, for instance. So whereas we do have data with respects to social workers employed by government, for instance, we do have issues with respect to social workers employed within the non-government sector, for instance. We know that NPOs delivering social welfare services, for instance, employ social workers on their own budgets, for instance, which we have very little data on with respects to the supply side or with respects to the demand side. I think we are talking in the model that the department used, it's looking at your capacity of your social workers and workforce of your social workers. The data is dated back to 2015, for instance, looking at what a certain particular social worker, what is their capacity in terms of the cases that are able to handle, for instance. This data dates back to 2015, and we felt that needs to be sort of updated because we have various legislation that affects that going forward, for instance. So looking at that in terms of your demand and supply model with respect to social workers, I think that needs to be updated in order to ensure better workforce planning going forward. That's notwithstanding the fiscal constraints that I already mentioned, that's inhibiting employing additional social workers. Thank you, Chairperson. I'll hand over to Prudence.
Thank you, Yusuf. Thank you, honorable members. So on the issue about the framework not being a success, we believe while it outlines the key pillars adequately and how we need to respond in terms of planning, budgeting, monitoring, and evaluation, it does not necessarily put an action plan on how this will be institutionalized. And I think that is where the gap is. Without adequate direction and guidance on how each and every department is supposed to respond to the implementation of this framework, it becomes difficult for departments to identify themselves and be able to see where and which gap they will be filling. The question about not having sufficient training and whether or not the departments are able to respond, the question is simply no. There isn't enough training on this. There is a course, I believe, with NSG that speaks about the new framework. So it outlines what the framework is, but it does not tell you what an institutionalized gender responsive planning, budgeting, monitoring, and evaluation looks like. So it does not do the mainstreaming work. So there is definitely a huge gap on the training side. And in terms of compliance and enforcement, that can be done by DWIPD as the custodians of the framework itself. And on the issue of the list of departments that have been selected, the intergovernmental governance structure will be considering firstly the list of recommendations made by the various committees during the budget hearings this year, and mainly focusing on the social aspect because we previously focused on economic empowerment. So that is under discussion. The list has not been finalized as yet, and we will also be looking at those that did not respond in the last round for inclusion in the next one. And then the question about whether DBE and tourism also did not have specific gender interventions. It's important for the members to note that the responses were very specific to economic empowerment for women. So it might happen that there are other interventions which are not necessarily for women economic empowerment that the department has in place, were just not tagged in this exercise in this round. In terms of the priorities that the departments have set for themselves, I'm unable to respond to that one on their behalf, but it is very hard for them. It would be very hard for them to respond on the priorities if they are not aligned as well to the gender gaps that we are looking at as a nation. And in terms of the effort that is not being made, we believe that we have taken corrective steps when we saw in the first two rounds of requesting the information in the MTF guidelines that the response was very low and poor. Sometimes we did not get any responses at all, and hence we took the action to establish a roadmap. And it's important also to note that institutionalizing a reform of this size internationally has not been done in less than 1 3-year cycle. It has to take longer because it is a massive task of institutionalizing and changing priority setting to be cross-cutting, in which most departments are used to institutionalizing and introducing policy priorities that are specific to their sectors, and therefore being able to measure and do something across all departments will take longer than that. Thank you.
Mr. Bitsa, is there anything else that you would like to add?
Now back to you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much. Can I check whether our minister is on the platform and whether she would like to say anything at this stage? Ms. Mpondo?
Chair, the minister is not in the platform. I think it is a struggle of network. However, I've noted all the questions I will send to the department so that they can respond in writing.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. I would like to thank Treasury, firstly. Thank you, colleagues, as well, for your participation this morning. Mr. Bitsa, I thank you for the commitments that you gave us in your closing remarks. I think as a portfolio committee, GBVF is one of the key focus areas for our portfolio committee. And as we are all aware, there's a war waging day in and day out against women, children, and people with disabilities, persons with disabilities. And we would like to see this National Council not only established, but fully funded. So thank you very much for making the commitment that Treasury will again go and look at the funds that will be allocated for this council. Because if we're not going to be funding this council adequately, we are going to be setting it up for failure. And if we're talking about a collective effort in this war against gender-based violence, then we really need all hands on deck, which also means we need Treasury to come to the party. With regards to the funding for the SDP, thank you as well that you have made the commitment that you will look at ring-fencing the funding. We find it absolutely unacceptable that when we speak about gender equality, there's one issue that really impedes gender equality, and that is that many young girls are unable to access their constitutional right to education because they cannot access sanitary products. And when provinces are spending that money on other things, whether it's the payment of staff or buying cars, then our portfolio committee really has got a problem with that. So the ring fencing on funding will really go a long way. We do want greater accountability as this portfolio committee for departments that fail women, youth, and persons with disabilities. And thank you also for speaking to the issues of accountability. I think when we talk about the gender responsive budgeting framework, it is very clear that this framework has got serious gaps and that it's ineffective and that it needs more focus and attention. But we as a portfolio committee will continue engaging with you, National Treasury, throughout the 7th administration. Thank you again for your time. And then to Ms. Mpondo, we would like to then next week when we meet with the minister, which will be an in-person meeting, we'd like to talk to her about the Women Empowerment Gender Equality Bill. We'd like to talk to her about the NYDA board as well as the National Council. I did share the legal opinion with her. But that having been said, colleagues, I thank you very much for your time this morning. Thank you for being here. And just to say that on our group, you would have seen the details for the 3 o'clock meeting as well. So for those who are able to join, we will see each other at the 3 o'clock meeting later this afternoon. Thank you very much, Treasury. Thank you so much, colleagues. Our meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Chair. Goodbye to all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mama Mabel.
Thank you, Chair. Long live the chair.
Long live the whip.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.